The bright lights of Nexus Station's main laboratory reflected off the polished surfaces as Dr. Olivia Reed hunched over her workstation. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and deep circles shadowed her eyes. 3 years on this massive space station, the pride of human-alien cooperation, and she still felt like an unwelcome guest. "Dr. Reed, your requisition for additional Vexar tissue samples has been denied," said the automated message system in its pleasant, emotionless voice. Olivia sighed and pushed away from her desk. Of course it was denied. All her requests were denied lately. She glanced at her reflection in the darkened screen. Tired eyes stared back at her. At 32, she had already published groundbreaking research on comparative alien biology before being selected for this prestigious posting. Now her career was slowly dying. "Reason for denial?" she asked, knowing the answer wouldn't satisfy her. "The Vexar delegation expresses regrets, but cannot accommodate the request at this time. No real explanation, just like the last 12 requests." Olivia stood and stretched her stiff back. The human sector of Nexus Station was quiet this late in the artificial night cycle. Most of her colleagues were either sleeping or socializing in the station's entertainment district. She hadn't been invited to join them. Again, she decided to visit the observation deck, her favorite place to think. The vast window offered a stunning view of the swirling nebula that surrounded the neutral star system where Nexus Station orbited. At least the stars didn't avoid her. As she walked through the main corridor that connected the different species sectors, she noticed the familiar pattern. 2 Kralthi diplomats were chatting near an intersection, but fell silent as she approached. Their insectoid bodies stiffened slightly, antennae twitching. They nodded politely, but quickly found a reason to move in the opposite direction. This wasn't paranoia. This was her daily reality. A few minutes later, she saw a Sentai researcher, Dr. Navala, whom she'd tried to collaborate with last month, hovering near the hydroponics lab. The gaseous being's containment suit glowed softly in the dimmed corridor lights. As soon as Navala noticed Olivia, the glow flickered, and what Olivia had learned was a sign of discomfort. The Sentai made a formal greeting gesture and quickly floated away. "Good evening to you too," Olivia muttered under her breath. When she reached the observation deck, she was relieved to find it empty. She pressed her palm against the cool, transparent material that separated her from the vacuum of space and tried to make sense of it all. It hadn't always been this way. When she first arrived, there had been cautious optimism on all sides. Her credentials were impeccable, and the station administrators had been excited about her potential contributions to interspecies research. The first few weeks had gone well enough. Then, gradually, things changed. Alien colleagues began finding excuses not to work closely with her. They maintained professional courtesy, but created distance at every opportunity. No one was overtly rude, that would violate diplomatic protocols, but the message was clear. They didn't want her around. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" The voice startled her. Olivia turned to see Dr. Gary Klein, one of the few human colleagues who still spoke to her regularly. Gary was nearly 60, with gray hair and kind eyes. He had been on Nexus since its inception, 7 years ago. "Best view in the galaxy," she replied, attempting a smile. Gary joined her at the window. "Heard about your request. Tough break." 13th one rejected this month, Olivia said. "I'm setting new records for failure." "It's not you, Olivia." "Then what is it?" "Because from where I stand it sure looks personal." Gary shook his head. "I've been watching this pattern with you. It's strange. I've never seen anything quite like it in all my years of interspecies diplomacy." Olivia turned to face him fully. "What do you mean?" "The aliens, they're not being malicious. Their reactions to you seem almost involuntary, like something subconscious." "Great. So I trigger some kind of instinctual disgust response? That's supposed to make me feel better?" Gary winced. "That's not what I meant. I just think there's something else happening here, something we don't understand yet. Well, whatever it is, it's killing my career. I came here to study alien biology, not to be treated like I have some contagious disease. The station's announcement system chimed softly, and a calm voice filled the room. Attention all personnel. The Interspecies Research Initiative selection results are now available on your personal terminals. Congratulations to all selected participants. Olivia's heart sank. The initiative, a massive new research program that would bring together scientists from all species for collaborative study. She had applied months ago, her hopes pinned on this opportunity to turn things around. You should check, Gary said, gently. Why bother? We both know what it will say. Check anyway. You never know. With reluctance, Olivia pulled out her tablet and accessed her messages. There it was, an official communication from the initiative's selection committee. She opened it, skimming past the formal greeting to the relevant part. After careful consideration of all applicants, we regret to inform you that your application has not been approved for participation in the Interspecies Research Initiative. The rest of the message blurred as tears welled in her eyes. She blinked them back fiercely. She wouldn't cry here, not on the observation deck where anyone could walk in. I'm sorry, Olivia, Gary said, reading her expression. I was more qualified than half the human applicants they selected, she said, her voice tight. My xenobiology specialization is exactly what they claim to be looking for. I know. Did you get in? Gary nodded uncomfortably. Yes? Good. At least one of us will be doing real science. She tried to keep the bitterness from her voice. It wasn't Gary's fault. Look, maybe I can talk to the committee. Don't, Olivia cut him off. Don't make this worse by asking for charity. I have enough trouble being taken seriously. They stood in silence for a while, watching the slow dance of stars outside the window. Finally, Olivia straightened her shoulders. I should get some sleep. Early shift tomorrow? Olivia, Gary called as she turned to leave. Don't give up, there's an explanation for all this. We just haven't found it yet. She gave him a tired smile. Maybe some puzzles aren't meant to be solved, Gary. Back in her quarters, Olivia sat on the edge of her bed and finally let the tears come. She had worked so hard to get here. Years of study, research, proving herself among the best in her field. Now she spent her days doing basic lab work that any assistant could handle, watching from a distance as the real scientific breakthroughs happened without her. Her terminal beeped with a new message. It was the full roster of selected participants. For the initiative. She shouldn't look, it would only hurt more, but she couldn't help herself. She scrolled through the names, noting several colleagues with less experience, fewer publications, and narrower expertise than her own. The alien participants included representatives from every major species on the station, even a few she had tried to collaborate with specifically. Everyone except her. Olivia closed the file and lay back on her bed staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would be another day of polite rejections and subtle avoidance, another day of wondering what was wrong with her. Computer, lights off, she said. In the darkness, she made a decision. If she couldn't participate in the initiative, she would conduct her own parallel research. She would observe the patterns of rejection more carefully, document everything. There had to be a scientific explanation for why every non-human species on Nexus Station seemed to find her presence disturbing. She was a scientist, after all, and this was just another puzzle to solve, even if she herself was the test subject. As she drifted toward sleep, Olivia didn't know that in just 3 days, a new human arrival would change everything. Someone who would finally see what everyone else had missed. Captain Frank Wilson stepped off the transport shuttle onto Nexus Station with a small duffel bag slung over his shoulder. At 40 years old, with short brown hair showing the first touches of gray at the temples, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen his share of unusual situations. As the new human security liaison for Nexus Station, his job was to maintain peaceful relations between Earth forces and the various alien security teams. Frank had spent the last 12 years in military intelligence, specializing in nonverbal communication and behavioral analysis. He could read small changes in body language that most people missed. This skill had saved his life more than once during tense diplomatic missions. Captain Wilson, "Welcome to Nexus Station," said Commander Diane Foster, the human administrative chief. She was a tall woman with dark skin and a no-nonsense attitude. "How was your journey?" "Long but uneventful," Frank replied, shaking her hand. "Best kind of space travel. Your quarters are ready, but I thought you might want a quick tour first. Get your bearings." Frank nodded. "Lead the way." As they walked through the massive station, Diane pointed out the different sectors: human, Vexar, Kralthi, Sentai, and several smaller alien enclaves. Nexus Station housed representatives from 12 different species, all working together on scientific research, trade agreements, and cultural exchange. "The main laboratory complex is through here," Diane said, leading him into a large open area with various workstations. "We have some of the brightest minds in the galaxy working on shared research projects." Frank noticed a woman working alone at a station in the corner. Something about her isolation caught his attention. "Who's that?" he asked quietly. Diane followed his gaze. "Dr. Olivia Reed, xenobiologist. Brilliant researcher, actually, but..." She hesitated. "But what?" "She has some difficulties working with the alien species. It's unusual. We've never quite figured it out." Before Frank could ask more questions, a group of Vexar scientists entered the lab. Their crystalline bodies reflected the light in dazzling patterns as they moved gracefully toward a research station. Frank watched their movements carefully, noting how they greeted humans and other aliens with formal gestures. Then he saw it, a subtle shift. The Olivia woman looked up from her work, and the Vexar's movements changed instantly. Nothing dramatic, just a slight tensing, a minor adjustment in their positioning. To most people, it would be invisible. To Frank, it screamed avoidance. Interesting. Later that day, after settling into his quarters, Frank decided to visit the station's common area. A large space designed for casual interaction between species, it featured adaptable seating and environmental controls to accommodate different biological needs. Frank got a coffee and sat at a table with a good view of the entire room, old habits from his intelligence days. Always know your surroundings. He watched the flow of the room, who talked to whom, how different species interacted, the small adjustments made to accommodate each other's customs. There was a genuine attempt at understanding here. He liked that. The door opened and Dr. Reed walked in. Frank straightened slightly, paying close attention to what happened next. A Sentai who had been floating near the beverage station suddenly changed direction. Two Kralthi seated at a table began gathering their things. A human Vexar conversation group shifted subtly, closing ranks. None of it was obvious. If you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't see it. But the pattern was unmistakable. Within 2 minutes, Dr. Reed had gotten her tea and sat alone at a table, a small empty circle around her in an otherwise crowded room. Frank finished his coffee and made a decision. He stood up and walked directly to her table. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Olivia looked up, surprised. Sure," she said cautiously. Frank sat down across from her. "Captain Frank Wilson, new security liaison. Dr. Olivia Reed, xenobiology." She studied him curiously. "First day? Is it that obvious? You're still talking to me, so yes." There was no self-pity in her voice, just stating a fact. Frank smiled. "I noticed something interesting just now. Want to hear?" Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Sure." "When you walked in, at least 7 different beings made small adjustments to avoid being near you. None of them looked at each other to coordinate this. It was completely instinctive." Olivia's eyes widened slightly. Most people wouldn't have noticed such a specific observation. "That's unusually perceptive," she said carefully. "I spent years reading subtle behavioral cues. It was my job to notice things others miss." Frank kept his voice low. "And what I'm seeing here isn't personal dislike. It's something else." Olivia stared at him for a long moment. 3 years, she finally said. "I've been dealing with this for 3 years and you spotted it in one day?" Fresh eyes sometimes help. What exactly do you think you're seeing, Captain Wilson? I think I'm seeing a reaction that's not conscious. Something instinctual. Franco leaned forward. And I think you've been trying to figure it out yourself. Olivia's grip tightened on her cup. What makes you say that? Because you're a scientist. If people avoided me for years with no explanation, I'd want to know why. The tension in Olivia's shoulders eased slightly. I've been documenting patterns, she admitted. Species differences, contextual factors, environmental variables, but I haven't found anything conclusive. Maybe you need a different perspective. She looked at him skeptically. And you're offering yours? I'm curious, Frank said simply. And in my experience, unexplained behavior patterns usually have logical causes. Even if I wanted your help, what exactly would we do? I've tried everything I can think of. Let's start by observing more interactions. With your scientific knowledge and my behavioral analysis background, we might spot something new. Olivia was quiet for a moment, considering. Frank didn't push. He waited patiently for her decision. There's a multi-species meeting tomorrow in Botanical Garden 3. She finally said. Some kind of ceremonial plant exchange. I was planning to observe from a distance. Perfect opportunity. Frank nodded. I'll be there anyway as security liaison. You really think we might figure this out? For the first time, Frank heard a note of hope in her voice. I make no promises, but 2 perspectives are better than 1. The next day, Frank arrived at the Botanical Garden early. The large, dome-shaped, room-housed plants from dozens of worlds, carefully maintained in specialized environmental chambers. In the center, representatives from 6 different species gathered around a table displaying various seedlings and cuttings. Frank positioned himself near the entrance, looking like he was simply doing his job. When Olivia entered, she gave him a small nod and moved to a research console on the far side of the room. For 30 minutes, nothing unusual happened. The ceremony proceeded smoothly, with each species presenting a plant gift to the others. Frank watched everyone's interactions carefully. Then it happened. Olivia moved from her console toward a display of earth plants. Her path took her within a few feet of a Kralti ambassador. The reaction was immediate. The insectoid being's antennae stiffened, and it made a small clicking sound that Frank recognized as distress. The ambassador quickly recovered and continued its conversation, but the pattern was clear. Frank made a mental note of the exact distance between Olivia and the Kralti when the reaction occurred. As the ceremony ended, Frank noticed several other similar reactions. Each time the alien species showed subtle signs of discomfort when Olivia came within a certain distance. After the event, they met in a quiet corner of the human sector's cafeteria. Did you see it? Olivia asked eagerly. I did. There's definitely a proximity trigger. About 2 meters, give or take. That matches my observations, Olivia said, pulling out her tablet and showing him charts she'd created. But it doesn't explain why. No, Frank agreed, but it gives us something to work with. Whatever is happening, it's consistent across species with very different biology, which suggests they're all sensing something we humans can't detect. Olivia's eyes lit up with scientific curiosity. Captain Wilson, I think we need to run some tests. For the first time in 3 years, Olivia didn't feel completely alone with her mystery. Someone else saw the pattern. Someone believed her, as they began planning their investigation. Neither of them noticed Commander Foster watching them from across the room, a thoughtful expression on her face. Hold still, Olivia said as she attached small sensors to Frank's temples. They were in her private lab, a small room she had set up away from the main research facilities. After their observation at the Botanical Garden, they had agreed to start testing their theories in a controlled environment. These will measure your basic neural activity, she explained. I want to establish a human baseline first. Frank sat patiently in the chair while Olivia worked. Over the past week, they had spent most of their free time together comparing notes and developing a research plan. Frank had never met anyone who approached problems with such methodical determination. So, what exactly are we looking for? He asked. Anything unusual? Olivia replied, checking the sensor readings on her tablet. Whatever makes the aliens uncomfortable, it has to be something they can detect that humans can't. Like a smell? Olivia shook her head. I've ruled that out. The Sentai don't even have olfactory senses similar to ours, and they react the same. Where's the others? Frank thought for a moment. What about energy emissions? Electromagnetic fields, radiation? That's what I'm thinking, Olivia said, looking up from her tablet with approval. Many alien species can detect energy patterns humans can't perceive. The Vexar, for instance, can see into the ultraviolet spectrum. When she finished taking his readings, Olivia removed the sensors and then attached them to her own temples. Now let's see if there's anything different about me, she said. The small machine hummed quietly as it collected data. Frank watched Olivia's face as she concentrated. After 3 years of rejection, most people would have given up or become bitter. But she had turned her isolation into a scientific puzzle to be solved. He admired that. The machine beeped, and Olivia removed the sensors. She stared at the tablet screen, her brow furrowed. Huh? She said. What is it? Frank moved to look over her shoulder. My neural activity is different. There's a pattern here I've never seen before. She pointed to a wave-like formation on the screen. See this oscillation? It's not present in your readings at all. Is it harmful? No, I don't think so. It's just unusual. Olivia looked thoughtful. We need more data and better equipment. The problem was getting access to the specialized equipment they needed. Most of it was in the main laboratory complex where alien scientists worked. Olivia couldn't approach them directly. They would simply avoid her as usual. I think I have an idea, Frank said. Commander Foster seems to like me. I could ask her for help. The next day, Frank met with Commander Foster in her office. A specialized scanner? Foster repeated after hearing his request. That's an unusual ask from security personnel, Captain. It's for a personal project, Frank explained. Dr. Reed and I are investigating something together. Foster's expression changed subtly at the mention of Olivia's name. I see. She studied him for a moment. You've noticed it too, haven't you? The way the aliens react to her? Yes. And we think we might be close to understanding why. Foster leaned back in her chair. I've always felt bad about Dr. Reed's situation. She's brilliant, but her career has been stalled for years because of whatever this is. She made a decision. I can get you access to the equipment for 48 hours. The Xenophysics lab will be empty this weekend while everyone attends the interspecies cultural exchange. Thank you, Commander. Just find some answers, Wilson. That woman deserves to know why she's been treated like a pariah. That weekend, Olivia and Frank worked tirelessly in the Xenophysics lab. The advanced scanners revealed what the simpler equipment couldn't. Olivia's brain produced a unique electromagnetic signature, broadcasting at frequencies that human instruments rarely measured. According to these readings, Olivia said, pointing to the display, I'm constantly emitting a very specific pattern of electromagnetic energy. Look at the frequency range. Frank examined the numbers. What does this mean? I'm not sure yet, Olivia said. But many alien species use these frequency ranges for communication or sensing danger. The Kralti, for example, detect predators through electromagnetic disturbances. So you might be setting off some kind of alarm system in their brains? Possibly. Olivia's eyes widened with realization. Frank, we need to check something. Can you get me access to the medical database? I want to look for any other humans with similar brain patterns. With Commander Foster's help, they gained temporary access to the station's medical records. Olivia spent hours searching through brain scan data from the human population on Nexus Station. Nothing, she finally said, rubbing her tired eyes. No other humans on the station show this pattern. What about Earth records? Frank suggested. There must be a larger database. Accessing Earth's medical database required special permission, but Foster came through again. After 2 more days of searching, they found what they were looking for. There, Olivia pointed excitedly at her screen. 7 documented cases in the last century, All humans with the exact same neural pattern. Only 7? Frank asked, surprised. Out of billions of people? It's extremely rare. About 1 in a billion. And look at this. She scrolled down to show him the notes attached to the cases. 3 of these people reported experiencing unusual reactions from animals. One woman said cats would always hiss at her, even though she loved them. Animals on Earth were sensing the same thing the aliens sense in you, Frank said, understanding dawning on his face. Exactly. It's a genetic variation that causes my brain to emit this specific frequency. Olivia sat back in her chair, processing the information. It's not harmful to me or to them. It's just broadcasting on a channel that registers as a warning signal to certain nervous systems. Frank shook his head in amazement. All this time they weren't being prejudiced. They were having an instinctual reaction they couldn't control or even understand. The universe has a twisted sense of humor, Olivia said with a sad laugh. Sending a xenobiologist who triggers alien flight responses to an alien research station. But now that we know what's happening, we can do something about it, Frank said firmly. They spent the next week researching potential solutions. If they couldn't change Olivia's brain, perhaps they could block or modify the signal it was sending. Frank reached out to an engineer friend on Earth who specialized in electromagnetic shielding. The solution, when it came, was surprisingly simple. HFY small device that generated a neutralizing field, canceling out the specific frequencies Olivia's brain produced. It could be worn as a pendant or wristband, completely unobtrusive. The day the prototype arrived, Olivia held the small silver pendant in her palm, hardly daring to hope. What if it doesn't work? She whispered. Then we try something else, Frank said confidently. We don't give up. Olivia put the pendant around her neck and activated it. The tiny light on its side glowed blue, indicating it was working. How do you feel? Frank asked. The same, Olivia said. But that's not the real test. The real test came the next day when they went to the main cafeteria during peak hours. As they entered, Olivia gripped Frank's arm nervously. The room was filled with aliens and humans having their midday meal. Ready? Frank asked quietly. Olivia nodded, and they walked together toward the food service area. A Sentai researcher floated nearby, its containment suit glowing with soft light. As Olivia approached, Frank watched carefully for the usual reaction. Nothing happened. The Sentai continued its conversation with a human colleague, not even glancing in their direction. No avoidance, no discomfort. They moved on, passing close, to a table where 2 Vexar scientists sat with a Kralthi diplomat. Again, no reaction. The aliens continued their meal without interruption. Frank looked at Olivia, whose eyes were wide with disbelief. It's working, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. They don't feel it anymore. For the first time, in 3 years, Olivia stood in a room full of aliens who didn't instinctively avoid her. The feeling was overwhelming. She had forgotten what it was like to be just another person in a crowd, not a walking disturbance. As they sat down with their food, Commander Foster approached their table. Dr. Reed, Captain Wilson, she greeted them with a smile. I see your project has borne fruit. How did you know? Frank asked. Foster nodded toward a group of Kralthi near the entrance. They're not clicking their mandibles anxiously for the first time when Dr. Reed is in the room. Whatever you've done, it appears to be working. We found the cause, Olivia said, touching the pendant at her neck. And a solution. Excellent work, both of you. Foster looked at Olivia with genuine respect. Dr. Reed, the Interspecies Research Initiative is meeting tomorrow to discuss their next project phase. I think they should hear about your discovery. Olivia stood outside the meeting room, her heart pounding. Inside, the full committee of the Interspecies Research Initiative waited to hear her presentation. For 3 years, these were the same beings who had avoided her, denied her applications, and kept her at arm's length. Nervous? Frank asked, standing beside her. Terrified, Olivia admitted, touching the silver pendant at her neck for reassurance. What if the device stops working in the middle of my presentation? It won't, Frank said confidently. We tested it thoroughly. Besides, I'll be right there with you. In the week since they discovered the solution, they had conducted extensive tests with various alien species. The neutralizing pendant worked consistently, allowing Olivia to interact normally with aliens for the first time since she arrived on Nexus Station. Commander Foster approached them in the hallway. "They're ready for you, Dr. Reed." Olivia took a deep breath and nodded. This was her chance to finally be heard, to turn her years of isolation into something meaningful. The doors slid open, and they walked into the large circular room. Around a U-shaped table sat representatives from all major species on Nexus Station: the crystalline Vexar, the insectoid Kralthi, the gaseous Sentai, and several others. Human scientists sat among them, including Dr. Gary Klein, who gave Olivia an encouraging smile. "Dr. Olivia Reed and Captain Frank Wilson," announced Commander Foster. "They wish to present their findings on an important interspecies communication issue." As Olivia moved to the center of the room, she watched the aliens carefully. No mandible clicking from the Kralthi. No color shifts from the Vexar. No movement toward the exits. The pendant was working. "Thank you for agreeing to hear us," Olivia began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "For the past 3 years, I've experienced a phenomenon that many of you have felt but couldn't explain. An instinctive aversion reaction whenever I came within approximately 2 meters of non-human species." Several alien representatives shifted uncomfortably, but none denied her observation. "With Captain Wilson's help, I've discovered the cause of this reaction." Olivia activated the large display screen behind her, showing brain scan images. "I have an extremely rare genetic variation that causes my neural activity to produce a specific electromagnetic pattern. This pattern broadcasts at frequencies that many alien nervous systems interpret as warning signals." She explained their research methodology and findings, including the historical cases on Earth. As she spoke, she saw growing interest in the eyes and postures of the alien scientists. They were actually listening to her. "The solution we developed is simple but effective," Olivia continued, touching her pendant. "This device creates a neutralizing field that cancels out the problematic frequencies. That's why you're not feeling uncomfortable around me today." A Vexar scientist named Tyrval raised a crystalline appendage. "May I ask a question, Dr. Reed?" "Of course," Olivia said. "If your theory is correct, we should be able to measure both the frequencies your brain emits and the neutralizing effect of your device. Would you be willing to participate in monitored tests?" "Absolutely," Olivia replied, trying to contain her excitement. This was the first time a Vexar had directly engaged with her research. A Kralthi representative clicked its mandibles in a pattern indicating thoughtfulness. "This explains much. When near you, I always felt an urge to move away but could not understand why. I believed it was a personal failing in my diplomatic training." "It wasn't personal at all," Frank explained. "The reaction was entirely physiological, beyond conscious control." For the next hour, Olivia answered questions from the committee. The aliens were fascinated by the discovery, especially the implications for interspecies communication. One by one, they began to share their own experiences of discomfort around Olivia, now able to describe what they had felt but couldn't previously articulate. Finally, Dr. Navala, the Sentai researcher who had avoided Olivia for years, floated forward. "Dr. Reed," the gaseous being said through its translator, "I owe you an apology. When you approached me about collaboration last year, I refused without proper explanation. I felt a disturbance in my electromagnetic field that I interpreted as danger. Had I known the true cause, things would have been different." "No apology necessary," Olivia said sincerely. "You couldn't have known." "Nevertheless," Navala continued, "your discovery is remarkable. It reveals a shared sensitivity across different evolutionary paths. Many of us developed electromagnetic sensing for entirely different reasons, yet we all interpreted your brain's signature similarly." The head of the initiative, a human named Dr. Patel, stood up. "Dr. Reed, Captain Wilson, thank you for this presentation. I believe I speak for the entire committee when I say this discovery opens exciting new avenues for research." He looked around the table, receiving affirmative gestures from each representative. We would like to propose establishing a new research division focusing on interspecies neurological compatibility, with Dr. Reed as its head. Olivia couldn't believe what she was hearing. After years of rejection, they were offering her a leadership role. The unique perspective you bring, having experienced this neurological incompatibility firsthand, makes you ideally suited to guide this work, Dr. Patel continued. And Captain Wilson's contribution demonstrates the value of human observational skills in solving interspecies challenges. I would be honored, Olivia managed to say. As the meeting adjourned, alien scientists approached Olivia individually. Some apologized for their past behavior, while others eagerly discussed potential research collaboration. The sense of acceptance was overwhelming after so many years of isolation. Frank stood back, watching with a smile as Olivia was finally seen for the brilliant scientist she was. 3 months later, the Interspecies Neurological Research Division had become one of the most active departments on Nexus Station. Olivia's team had identified 12 other frequencies that caused communication difficulties between various species, and they had developed neutralizing devices for each one. On this particular day, Olivia stood at a podium, preparing to address the inaugural conference for their new field of study. The large hall was filled with scientists from all 12 species represented on Nexus Station, sitting comfortably side by side. Frank sat in the front row, no longer just the security liaison but now officially assigned as the division's human behavioral specialist. Beside him sat Commander Foster, Dr. Klein, and representatives from Earth's top research institutions. As Olivia looked out at the audience, she remembered how differently this room would have looked 3 months ago, with empty seats around her and uncomfortable aliens trying to maintain polite distance. Welcome to the first Interspecies Neurological Compatibility Conference, she began. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter in how different species communicate and understand each other. She touched the silver pendant at her neck, now enhanced with additional features to help study various neurological patterns. Our journey began with a simple question. Why would 12 different species with vastly different evolutionary paths all feel uncomfortable around a single human? The answer led us to discover something profound, that beneath our biological differences, we share certain fundamental neurological responses. By understanding these patterns, we can bridge gaps that once seemed insurmountable. As she continued her speech, Olivia caught Frank's eye. He gave her an encouraging nod. Without his human perspective, his ability to look beyond instinctual reactions and see patterns others missed, she might still be working alone in her small lab, an outcast for reasons no one understood. The most important lesson from our research, Olivia said, is that sometimes what separates us is not prejudice or cultural misunderstanding, but simply that we're tuned to different frequencies. And once we understand that, we can adjust the dial. Later, after the successful conference opening, Olivia and Frank walked together through the observation deck, stopping at their favorite spot overlooking the nebula. Not bad for someone who couldn't get aliens to stay in the same room with her 3 months ago, Frank said with a smile. Olivia laughed. It still seems unreal sometimes. All those years of rejection, and the answer was so simple. Not simple, Frank corrected her. We just needed the right combination of perspectives to see it. Your science and my observation. Olivia looked out at the swirling colors of the nebula. You know what the aliens call this project now? The human frequency. They say it represents how humans can find patterns that others miss. Frank took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them over the months of working closely together. Maybe that's our special contribution to the galaxy. We look closer when others look away. As they stood watching the stars, Olivia thought about the strange path that had led her here. A rare genetic variation had made her an outcast, but a human's willingness to look beyond first impressions had turned that same variation into a bridge between worlds.